Hey everybody, welcome to Drive Thru Review 719. Today we're going to talk about Trick Shot. This is a new game coming out from Wolf Designer. I believe they're based out of Latvia. And as you can see from the box cover, it is a hockey game. So players will be taking the two teams and they'll be going at it. And if I had to give you kind of just a little inkling of a clue of what the game is like, it's a lot like Blood Bowl. So if you're familiar with that, it's like Blood Bowl but hockey without the fantasy. But that's being kind of glib. So let's jump down to the table. We'll take a look at some of the mechanics and the components and everything, and then we'll jump back here to my talking head and I'll tell you what I think. Okay, I've got the board set up here, and you can see it's a decent sized board. It kind of represents the hockey rink pretty accurately, I think. Now this copy that I have actually comes with pre-painted miniatures, so you can get a good sense there of what those look like. You can get this without painted miniatures. You can get them and then paint them yourself. Now I will say at the time that I received this was actually the only kind of copy you could get. All the unpainted miniature copies were sold out actually. So if you're watching this video in real time, you might only be able to purchase this one, which is a little bit more money obviously for the pre-painted miniatures. So let's talk a little bit about how the turns are broken down and some of the actions you can do. So at the top of the board you can see this kind of time clock. So what will happen is player will take their turn, they'll do a certain number of actions, and then when the next player goes, we're going to slowly move this referee marker, which there's also just a cardboard token that you can use as well. And then you'll just kind of move this down, and once it gets to the end, is about to move off, that will be the end of that period. And if you're playing a short game, you just play through one period, but if you're playing kind of a full game, you're going to go through here 3 times and do 3 periods. Now one thing you might do before setup, and maybe not for your first game, is you'll have a whole stack of these arena cards. And there's a few different ways that the rules tell you can do it, like you can kind of go through and pick them or randomly deal them to each player. Maybe play like a little mini tournament, or maybe we're playing in Las Vegas for one game and then the other player's in Los Angeles, and you kind of go back and forth. But one thing to notice about these cards is there's a special rule here on the arena card, and there's also these 4 cards here. It says agile, flexible, vigorous, and aggressive. So what these match up to are line cards. And there are 2 decks of these line cards. You can kind of see the red background in the jersey there, and this one has kind of a blue background. And they're identical decks. And so you'll go and fish out the flexible, agile, vigorous, and aggressive cards from each deck, and each player will have this kind of hand of cards based on the arena. And again, this is kind of the advanced rules, but just spoiler alert, I would recommend playing with these rules definitely after your first play, but even maybe for your first play. And so what these cards will do is kind of change up special abilities that you might have on your turn. And there's also rules for like drafting these. If you're going to play kind of a league situation or a tournament type of situation, then you might set up and kind of draft these in between games. But the way that these work is before the initial face-off, each team will put and choose one of their cards face down. You'll simultaneously reveal them, and then that'll be your team's special ability. And then whenever you do a line change, which is an action you can do on your turn, then you're going to basically discard this and then put another one face down and flip it up. And then that will be your new special ability. So every time you do a line change, you're going to go through these. So you kind of change it up over the course of the game. And then once you've gone through your 4 cards, you'll kind of pick them up, kind of like Concordia style or Flotilla if you've played those games. So you kind of play your cards, but you can't use that card again usually, unless there's some special ability that allows you to do it, until you have played all your cards and you pick them up. So you kind of want to be considerate about when these different special abilities are going to be important given the kind of the situation of the game. And so let's talk about some of the actions here. And I do want to make note of this awesome player aid, which is on Board Game Geek. This does not come in the game. It is super useful. I printed these out on some card stock, and these are just all the actions you can do in your game. And these are kind of like all the various kind of dice results that may or may not happen when you do the action. Now don't let this overwhelm you, because I would say go ahead and print this out. If you're going to get this game printed out, this will get you into like your first couple of rounds. And then once you get into it, then you won't really need these anymore. Maybe refer to them once in a while if you try like a slap shot or a clear ice pass, which is something you don't typically do on a normal turn. You're like, how does that work again? You can just go here and look at the dice results and say, oh, okay, this was what happens and I failed by this much or whatever. So this is super handy. I definitely recommend folks print that out. But speaking of dice, what you do on your turn is you'll have a set of dice here, and then you'll start adding dice to a pool as you take action. So what you'll do on your first action is you'll take 1 die, add it to your pool, and then you're going to say, I'm going to do a move action, I'm going to do a pass action. You take and roll that die, and then based on the result, you may or may not fail, and it might be other different things that trigger. Typically what you want is to have blanks come up. That's always kind of a good thing. But then as you take your next action, you're going to add a second dice to your pool. Your third action will add a third die. And so your chances of rolling X's, which are always bad, or failures, is going to go up as you choose actions. So you kind of want to get your more important actions out of the way, or your risky actions out of the way first, typically, but it kind of depends on the situation, really. So it's a kind of a tactical thing. So you're going to just keep taking actions and adding dice to your pool until you fail out. Now you can re-roll these dice, and you can actually add more dice than what's even here. So there's 6 dice that come with the game, but I've played turns where you get 7 or 8 dice. And so you just kind of roll, and then you'll re-roll some of the others and stuff like that. Now let's talk about re-rolls. You'll see on the 2 sides of the board here, these little tokens here. And these are kind of like exhaustion tokens that you can spend to re-roll. So you'll see how they have the numbers on the backs of the player's jersey though. So when you spend, you'll flip one of these over, turn it over so there's no jerseys. And then that point, whenever you do that, you have to re-roll all of the dice that have symbols on them. The ones with blanks you can leave alone, but you have to re-roll all of them. So if you're just trying to get rid of this one X, you still got to re-roll all of the symbols though. But let's say you had a whole bunch of blanks, and you just had these 2 to re-roll, then that's actually a little bit better situation. So you can spend one of these to re-roll X's. Now there could be a time, and when you take certain actions, that you might trigger a penalty. So let's say you try to do a hit or a poke and you roll a certain number of X's. That will trigger a penalty immediately, and you can't actually do the re-roll. So that's something you want to keep in mind when you're about to do a hit or a poke, which could cause a fight or a penalty to be called. So you got to keep that in mind before you do that. So when you do an action here, you either choose and declare an action and you start adding dice to your pool, and some actions actually might add multiple extra dice to your pool, which will stay in your pool. So you could grow your pool very big very quickly. Or instead of doing that, you can do what's called a line change. And like I said, you will replace the line card that's face up in front of you, but then you'll be able to refresh all of your action tokens. Or sorry, I think I called these exhaustion tokens earlier. They're called stamina tokens, but when you exhaust them, then they're exhausted. So you can either choose to do one of the actions, again here on this nice handy chart there, or you can choose to do a line change and then swap your card and flip your tokens back. So before we look at some of the actions that you might do in the game, I just wanted to show you here, they have the cards here that sort of represent the stats of the different positions. So you've got a goalie here, so the size actually doesn't matter in the case of the goalie, but the speed does. They can move 1. Whereas you have the defenseman, the big brute that I showed you earlier, they have a size 3, speed 2. And then you've got the winger here, size 1, speed 3. And then you got the center, who's kind of the best of all things, size 2, but speed 3. And there is nice player aids here on the back for all this stuff, and that's my only real component gripe actually, is they have this stuff, which is kind of what's translated into these sheets here on the backs of these cards. Other than honestly this, but if I forget to talk about it in the review, that's my only component gripe, is everything else I think is great. Except for they have, the player aids on stuff, so if you're trying to flip stuff over, although you'll memorize the stats, there's not a lot of stats, you'll memorize those pretty good. And then while we're talking about components here, this is a really cool scoreboard. And it's actually really neat. I've never seen this before. So you have home and away. And then once you flip sides and change arenas, you just flip that over. So blue becomes home and red becomes away. Isn't that neat? So here's a situation that you'll often see in the game is you'll have a face-off here, and you always line up the same. And you'll have over here the goalies in each of the different goal, what are these called? The creases. I always forget what that's called. This is the crease, this little goal crease there. And before you face off, what you're going to do is each side is going to roll 3 dice here, and then whoever comes up with the most either arrows or hockey pucks is going to get the initiative. So let's say the red player rolled these 3, and then the blue player only rolled the 1. You ignore the X's there. So you're going to move this puck here into their space, and so they're now the puck carrier. And then you're going to set these aside, and then the red player will start making their pool. So they're going to say, I'm going to move and I'm going to roll a die. And then I'm going to pass the puck and I'm going to roll a die. Now, before I say that, I'm saying that actually wrong, because you can never take 2 actions with the same figure in a row. So if I have the puck here and I wanted to, pass it, I couldn't then move with that guy. You've got to alternate your actions there, and that's very important in terms of the sequencing of what you want to do. But let's say we've made a successful pass. I'll talk about how to pass in a second. But let's just work through our little chart here, and I'll just kind of quickly go through all the actions, and you'll start to get the gist here pretty quickly. So let's say this is the start of the turn, our first action. We're going to move. So we're going to roll that die, and then we failed. So maybe we exhaust it, you know, to do a re-roll or whatever. But what happens actually when you move, no matter what you roll, you're going to succeed, and you can move up to the speed. So this guy has a speed of 2, and when you move, you either move in a straight line diagonally or orthogonally. So if I wanted to do 1, 2, I would take that puck with me, or if I was down here, I could go 1, 2 forward or 1, 2 sideways. Now it's worth noting that if you are in check, which means an opposing player is orthogonally adjacent to you, you cannot move. You can only pass or shoot at that point with the puck. Now if they are diagonally adjacent to you, then you're not in check. So this is like a check action here, orthogonally, up, left, forward and down and so on, but not diagonally. So that's an interesting thing to do. Now if I fail, in this case, let's say I failed and I didn't want to re-roll it. I move, I still execute my move even though I failed, but my turn is over. And then it's going to go to the other player and they'll start to build their pool. First action, 1 dice, second action, 2 dice, and so on. And again, whenever there's kind of a turn and turnover, this will start to move down. Now it's worth noting while we're looking at this, if you score a goal and then you come back to, you'll reset everything up to a face-off. If the team that had the puck prior to the goal scoring gets the roll-off and keeps it, then the turn will not actually move up here. It's only once kind of possession changes hands. So you could have a team sort of, you know, keep going with a bigger turn. But remember, their dice pool here is going to stay the same. They don't reset their dice pool even though they just scored. Anyway, so that's move. Move's pretty easy. So let's say, let's kind of space some stuff out a little bit. They're back here, maybe he's down here. And you can do a pass. Now a pass can go any distance, but again, it's going to be a straight line, either orthogonally or diagonally. So maybe we'll want to, this guy's kind of moved the wings over here, right up there. And we'll want to do a pass. And maybe this is our second action. So we'll roll some dice there. Okay, that's a good example. So our pass is going to succeed. We're going to fail, and we're going to have to turn the turn over to the other player. But since we failed, we're going to actually look at the number of pucks we rolled, and it's going to go past the player equal to that number of pucks. So the pass is going to still happen, but since we failed, it's actually going to go 1 pass there. Now, if it had hit the wall or hit the wall at an angle, it's going to bounce a certain number of spaces, again, equal to that. So let's say we were a little bit later in the turn there, and we rolled this here, and we couldn't do it. And then so we would hit the ball here, so it would go 1 space past him, bounce back 1 there. So it'll bounce around a little bit. So these pucks are going to come into play based on kind of the action that you're doing. In a move, you really ignore the pucks. But in the pass, for example, you see that. And again, if it's a failure, now if we didn't fail, we would ignore the pucks and would just be perfect pass right to this guy. So only in the case of a failure here. And this chart here really kind of, you know, breaks that down and shows you what, because sometimes multiple X's will do nothing. You just, 1 X is all you really need to worry about. And sometimes, you know, have to count the number of pucks or the X's depending on the action there. Now it is worth noting that whenever you roll any of these arrows, even if you roll multiple, your opponent gets a reaction move. And what they can do is they can move orthogonally. When you do a reaction move, you can't do a diagonal move, but you can do an orthogonal move. So anytime any of these are showing after you're done with the rerolls, your opponent can move one of his guys orthogonally. And it's worth noting that happens after the action takes place. So they can't like intercept the pass or anything like that. And hopefully it's obvious that if there's a guy in the way, you can't obviously throw a pass that way because they'll just get the ball. Not the ball, the puck. Now another kind of pass you can do is if you're in this kind of central neutral zone, you can make what's called a clear ice pass. And this could be kind of an act of desperation or something, but you don't actually have to target another figure there. You just target anywhere in this neutral zone or space adjacent to one of these blue lines. So that might be like a clear out pass that you can do. And then you kind of want it to roll extra spaces. So in this case, you want a lot of pucks. So you might take kind of a try to get a carom shot. So if you're over here, you've got a guy over there, but there's not a clear line of sight, but you got a good shot there, you might try to bounce one over there. So that's kind of a fun hockey type of technique there. That's pretty cool. Now let's say this winger here is broken away and they've got the goal in their sights. If they can do the same thing as a pass where they can take a shot, and again, you've got to shoot directly forward or diagonal or whatever. And it's the same kind of thing. Now you don't want to roll any X's because if you roll 1 X, then it's going to rebound a space. So if we did that and I rolled whatever my dice rolls, it would roll an X there, but it would actually move more spaces based on the pucks. Now if you roll multiple X's, then it's just going to end up in the goalie's possession. Now it's worth noting as well, if the goalie's there, obviously you can't make that shot because you'd just be hitting it right to the goalie. Now a normal shot, you have to be in your offensive zone, again across the blue line there. But you can make a slap shot anywhere on the ice here. So, but you have to add 2 dice to your pool for each line that you cross to try to get it and hit a net shot. It's a real desperation type of shot there. And again, it's the same kind of results. If you get 1x, then it'll rebound equal to the 1 space plus the pucks, or if they get multiple x's, then the goalie will just take possession of it. Now finally, let's say we've got the winger here, and then this big fella here wants to do a poke. So a poke is to try to poke the puck away and then take possession of it yourself. Now if the goalie tries to do a poke, they're automatically going to add an extra 2 dice to the roll. If you get an X, you're going to fail. Again, you can re-roll that. However, if you get 2 X's on a poke, you can't re-roll that. That's going to cause a penalty. And when that happens, you're going to take, let's say the referee's right there, you're going to take and put that figure 2 spaces ahead of the referee. And they're not going to come into play until the referee moves there, or the opposing team scores a goal, then he's going to come back onto the ice right over here. Normally if he goes there, but if they score a goal, obviously they're going to go into the face-off position. Now if you roll 3 X's, then a fight's going to occur. I'll talk about a fight in a second. Now you can do a hit, and when you hit, you can actually do a move and a hit, and you have to be able to move actually into the space there. So for example, this guy's over there, he has a move of 2, right? So he can't actually do a hit from there. He's got to be able to move, get into that space with his normal movement, and then do a hit. And then he's going to roll his dice for the whole action. And if you're hitting the puck carrier, you don't always have to hit the puck carrier, then you're going to push him off and then take the puck, and if you're successful. Now in this case, if you roll any X's, even 1 X, you're going to fail and get a penalty. So a hit is much more risky. And instead of 3 X's causing a fight, then it's 2 X's in this case. And you can only hit somebody that is equal size or lesser size than you. You can't hit up. So a fight is kind of interesting here. So let's take a little example. So let's say these 2 players here had a fight. So he's a size 3, he's a size 2. So he's going to take 2 dice plus 1, he's going to take 3 dice plus 1. And then again, you need to re-roll extra dice. So you're going to roll dice. So anytime you roll an arrow, your opponent has to lose dice from their pool. Anytime you roll an X, you're going to lose a die from a pool. And you just keep rolling until one team runs out of dice. Both players are going to go to the penalty box. The winning side of the fight gets to refresh all of their tokens. And then you reset the board and have a face-off there after the fight. But that's pretty much it. You're just going to go back and forth playing up to 3 periods, moving around, trying to get positioning and board position, and obviously score as many goals as you can. Okay, so that is Trick Shot. Let's go through my 3 pillars of review there. First, talk about player count. Now, it does have rules for playing with more than 2 players, where you kind of just oscillate and take turns taking turns basically, and just kind of go back and forth. It does say that there's no like strategizing or crosstalk, which in that I'm not really sure I understand that, but I mean it's fine. But to me, it's a 2-player game, and that's really what this is meant to be. And I don't know that I really would have interest to play this with more than 2 people, other than if there was multiple people like, hey, I really want to try this, and I'd probably just set it up and let them play and just kind of teach them the game a little bit. But yeah, so it works fantastic as a 2-player game. Now the play time, the box says something like 30 minutes to, let's see, 30 to 90 minutes. And I think that depends on the style of game that you play, because if you played through just like 1 period, I mean, gosh, that would probably take you under 30 minutes once you know how to play the game. But if you were going to do kind of a little mini tournament, or you played in like 2 arenas, then I could see it taking about an hour and a half. But to play like 1 3-period game, 45 minutes or so, it's not very long. It really did surprise me actually, how kind of snappy and quick the turns could be in this. And so we'll just jump into my last pillar, which is, what is this game like? Well, I mentioned at the beginning, it's a lot like Blood Bowl, and it really is, where you have this kind of push your luck dice element. But this is a really kind of fresh take to me, where you just keep adding dice to the pool, dice to the pool, dice to the pool. And you have a really, really cool tension of like, okay, I've got the puck in a decent situation here, and I'm gonna start adding dice, and I don't want to like bail out of my turn, because what I want to really do is I want to do a line change refresh all my stamina tokens so that my next turn I'm going to have a bunch of rerolls. And, you know, because now I'm trying to get in a position to maybe take the shot, you know what I mean? So I want to reroll and make sure that it succeeds. And then maybe I want to swap out my line card because maybe a special ability allows me to like move through other players, or what's some of the other good ones? Like where it allows you to like pick up all your line cards anyway. There's a whole mess of them. There's tons of them. So having those kind of 4 cards to choose from over the course of the game, you try to set it up if you can to the spot where like when I have this line card out, it really is doing a lot of work for me. So that balance between kind of just taking your turn, you know, as far as you can versus let me pull back, let the other player kind of react, and then now I've refreshed everything. Because if you bail out on your turn and you do the fail, what you know, the X's, you don't re-roll them, then you can't do the line change and you can't refresh your exhaustion token. So next time you're not going to have anything really to do. So it's a good little balancing act there. And I really like that. And I really like what they've done here, where they didn't go crazy with like lots of teams and stats and all that kind of stuff. And this is a really cool way of having like asymmetric teams in a way, because they'll be asymmetric at different times, you know, based on the line card that's out. But then you also have the special abilities and stuff that are driven. The line cards are driven by the different arenas. So that's a lot of fun too. And they also have their own special abilities on the arenas themselves. And so you can really set this up to be almost in the same realm, the same ballpark as like a Blood Bowl League, because you can draft the line cards over the course of multiple games and, you know, get rid of some and swap some in. So there is rules for, you know, doing that and carrying that asymmetry a little bit further. But it is also kind of nice to know that, okay, I've got these 4 cards and the other player has those 4 cards. So when would they maybe be using them? And so there's a little bit of like a guessing game around that kind of thing, where like, okay, they'll probably use that now. So if I use this one will probably counter that a little bit, or I can kind of work around it a little bit. So all of those kind of design choices are really, really smart. And like I said, the components are great. I had the one small gripe about the little player aid cards, but that's just a nitpick really. Now I will say, I want to just get this in the way. So there's, the thing is the same as the game is so good, like it's almost perfect, you know, whatever that means. But there's 2 things that I've seen here that I'm like, oh man, this is obviously the best hockey game I've played. I've played one other hockey game. I don't think there's any other good ones. There was one like years ago that was like a card game that was pretty cool. But it was a card game, and I was like, wasn't really playing hockey. So the thing that is interesting about this is you can have 2 kind of strange situations. One thing is, I don't know how they would fix it, but your face-offs are always at center ice, and you never have face-offs in the offensive zones of the other player. Because, you know, I don't know if you know hockey, but, you know, there's the other like little face-off areas that are closer to the goals. So I'm like, yeah, I don't know how they fix that and how they could do it. Because maybe if you have a penalty that happens in the offensive zone, then instead of facing off in the center, then you can face off in that offensive zone. I don't know. There's probably some rules that they could do that, but I assume that they tried them out and it didn't work. It's not that big a deal. It's just like you always are resetting back at the center. So like the dynamics of the space and the rink is always kind of based on that, which is okay. I mean, it's just be kind of interesting to have them. Maybe it would be you'd score so many goals so fast because you could just get the puck and run out and shoot the goal really quick or something if you had it so far on the side. That's my guess is why that doesn't happen. But anyway, so the other thing about that is the positioning and the movement stuff coming off of center ice is really going to dictate, how do I say this the right way, like how quick that turn is going to be. Because I've seen enough times where you get the ball, pass it, winger gets it, the other guy shoots up, pass to score, like really quick. And it's kind of neat. But if it happens like in your first game on your second turn, you're going to be like, what's up with this game? Now that doesn't happen a lot. I would say it doesn't happen like a ton, but it happens like enough. But then there's other, sort of situations where everything's spaced out really nice and it's very chess-like, and you've got like guys moving here and reacting and checking the guy, and then it's just you got to like bounce the puck around and all that kind of stuff. And so it does take on that cool positioning where the game like almost gets to, in a hockey game where the one offensive team is kind of passing the ball around back and forth, looking for that like perfect little opening, like sneaking around and trying to, throw guys off and stuff like that. Like that, you don't really get a ton of in this game, but sometimes you do get those moments where it's like that, and it's really cool. and just the kind of tension of that as you're starting to add dice to your different abilities and stuff. And then you get, like I said, back to that decision point of like, do I keep going, or I have to like, unexhaust all my my stamina tokens. So I would say, but I don't know, like I've only played it twice, full three period games twice. And the more and more that I've played it, the more I've seen like, okay, so if you get like a breakaway, that's just super luck, and that could happen in real hockey and stuff like that. But you start to see like how many kind of myriad different little options and stuff you have with your reactions and all that kind of stuff, and especially the line cards. And so there is some depths here to that. But I just wanted to throw that out there because I think somebody could play it and be like, oh, what? This kind of puts you off. And so I would say keep playing it, like keep doing some setups and stuff like that, because you will see a lot of I think the nuances kind of evolve through the course of the game. But you can get those kind of quirky little moments of like somebody just like, what the hell, they just scored, But anyway, other than that, this is one of my absolute favorite sports games. I mean, I like Blood Bowl and Blitz Bowl right up there as part of the football style games. I like the Rumble Slam for the wrestling game. That's probably my favorite. But this is right there, because this is like as close to as perfect a hockey game as I think you could really get, and still have it be fun and quick and exciting and snappy and just really engaging without miring down in too many mechanics. This to me strikes that kind of perfect balance of that, because it does. The turns are snappy and they quicken and they flow, and that you can't undersell that in a sports game, because you don't want to be like, you don't want to be playing like Warhammer 40K here, where you're like, oh, I move this guy 2 inches this way and do that and screen and abilities. That's good for that game, but this is like, I want to move and quick and fast, and you weren't paying attention. The guy who went by you, it's fast, especially hockey. Hockey's like the fastest game in the world, and this really kind of captures that essence. So I definitely recommend it. This is going to stay on my shelf probably forever. And I don't talk about it much on the channel because it's a board game channel, but I'm a big sports guy. I love hockey, and we go to the minor league hockey games here all the time. And I love basketball. And I know basketball is kind of big in Latvia, I think. So you guys should make a basketball game, because it's my favorite sport. But yeah, so this is really cool, because it's still, I just want to harp on this one thing, because it still is like very chess-like in some situations. You get that really positional kind of area movement dynamics there, but it stays fast. It doesn't like sink into the bog of like, I don't know, sometimes a sports game or this kind of positional movement game, you can just get really like, dude, just push your guy wherever, because it's sports. It should be fast and snappy. And this maintains all of that. But you still like feel like you got the little nuggets to chew on strategically, tactically, whatever you want to call it. So anyway, I definitely recommend it. I know it's going to be a little bit hard to find here in the near term, but I think they're going to come out with another batch of printing and stuff like that. So I'm super excited for folks to get a handle of this, especially if you're a hockey fan. Like, my God, you have to get this. It's so fun. All right, thanks.